All of your elevations are labeled conceptual. Your floor plan is labeled conceptual. These drawings were dated back in March, and typically when a document comes here, site plan, layouts, building plans, they're finished. Because if it was just a site plan, we were approving it here, we're not going to approve a conceptual layout. Because what does that say? It means there's something done, not done, and it's not finished. And I've got a real issue with that because it's spread out all over your elevations, even your rendering. The 2 sheets of elevations you got here, you got a floor plan that's laid out, and conceptual is, it's almost like it's not finished yet. I'm going to say that again and leave it, because this is going to the council. This is the PUD, gets recommended to the council. They may raise the same questions, but it shouldn't even come here in that kind of condition. And that raises a lot of questions with me. Can you address that? That's the first time I've heard that kind of explanation, and particularly coming before this commission. You're going to go to all these other, state boards, state commissions with conceptual drawings. That's what you should have done coming here, with all due respect. And I have a real problem with that. The other thing is I listened to what Laura had to say about your site plan. It's really nicely developed. The circulation, the amenities that this gentleman presented. The only other issue that came up, there's a lot of variances that are being requested, particularly on the room sizes. And that just kind of froze me, and that's the real high point that I have an issue with. Being that far off in square footage from the minimum. And I just did some layout here of just furniture and items that would have to be in each of these rooms. And it's just too small, just from basic architectural graphic standards, and you're an architect. If you take into effect, chair or rocker, dresser, a single bed like in a studio, you're like about 180 square feet just taking that up in the toilet room, and the shower. And quite obviously, I have a concern with that, with people that are going into a care facility like this. And the other rooms are just as small. They're so far off square footage, percent reduction from our minimums. I just find it unacceptable. And we're the body that reviews this. Before it goes to the legislature, the council, and I have some difficulty passing that on. And then through the chair to Laura, the square foot variances that you've got listed here, I could not follow the math on that at all. From our recommended minimums, where you've got 4 square foot variance, a 49 square foot variance, that had a hard time adding that up.
That's in our zoning ordinance. There's a difference between assisted living and elderly care facilities, and that's going by the units that are listed there. They're showing 4 different type of units, and and I believe 2 of those require variances.
I understand. I just didn't follow the math from what was presented here is our minimum square footages. And the other question is, what is the definition of a assisted living studio unit? Does somebody actually occupy that, or is that a daytime thing? And what is a memory care unit? I'm not in your industry, but I think for the board.
Basically, yeah, that's why I'd love really to have you do a tour of one of our buildings. I'm not sure where you got your minimum square footage, if that's based off in like senior living, like that's a senior living complex, or is that based on assisted living?
It was right in the planning director's letter at the top of page 2.
But what is that, what are you judging that on? Is that an assisted living?
You'll
or
have
is
to
that
direct that to the planning director.
I'm just curious, I just was,
This is something that we addressed, you know, previously as far as, the discrepancies between zoning ordinances and what we have. There's nothing specific in the ordinance for this type of facility. We have 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom studios. And this is the home for the age, assisted living that it's, we provide dining areas, living areas, outside. So there's nothing specific in the ordinance that addresses this type of facility. With that, they're supported, essentially, 2 of them fall within, what is available, 2 of them slightly not. That's where
so Chris, if I can answer your question, you asked about memory care. The whole premise of memory care is if you ever knew any loved ones or anybody that had memory care issues, their mind is just as sharp as it was the day before they had it. But prior, what's going on is now it's getting confused. The best way I can explain that to you is if you ever walked into a room and you thought, oh my God, what did I walk in this room for? And you step out and you have to kind of think, they're going through that all day, every day, 24 hours a day. So they don't want a real big room. They can't have a real big area. That's why we have a separate dining room and living room. And if you look at their square footage on their apartment, it's smaller. Because then their mind doesn't have to comprehend so much. It's a lot easier. They can go from point A to point B in their apartment a lot easier. And that's the whole premise of what everybody's trying to do as they get older. So my wife and I, we're now looking at buying a condo because our home is too big. And that's kind of the whole premise of when they get into these buildings. They wanted a smaller apartment. But these apartments, again, if you compare apples to apples, if you're looking at other assisted living facilities, our apartments are a lot larger than you've ever seen in any other. And I've been doing this due diligence, and that's the whole reason I got in this business, is because I seen what was out there. Our buildings are beautiful. Our apartments are gorgeous. And the very first thing every tour says is, I can't believe how big these apartments are. Our apartments are very large. I know it's hard for you to think because you're probably living a 3,000 square foot home or whatever the case may be. They're not living in just this 346 square foot apartment or 537 square foot apartment. They're living out throughout the building. But that apartment is still a very large building. It's set up where they can have a nice couch, a love seat, and a chair. They have a little kitchenette where they have a little refrigerator, sink, and so forth. They are very large for an assisted living. Now, if you compare it to a hospital room, they're gigantic, but this isn't a hospital. It's not.
Not even doing that comparison.
No, I'm just trying to.
Not even doing it as a comparison to
There's
a
just
room I
different-
need.
there's
I
just
just didn't
different
know what a
ideas.
memory care unit, studio unit is.
Yeah,
What
and
is
that's
it?
going to be very small because you want that to be very small.
You had me, I think, in the first 2 sentences.
Okay, I don't mean to over-explain myself, but because if no one's ever really been in this situation, you don't really know. And usually nursing homes, they are probably about 150 square foot to 200 square foot, and there's usually 2 beds in that room. So
So this is special care unit, memory studio.
memory care is different. It still feels like a home, it still looks like a home, the apartments are still beautiful, but they're smaller because, for the most part, they're living throughout the living room and dining room because that's where the caregivers are pretty much caring for them because they want them to be their mind stimulated as much as possible. They don't want them to sit in an apartment all by themselves. That apartment in the memory care is realistically just sleeping quarters for them. The caregiver will get them ready for bed, and then he put them to bed. But once they get up in the morning, they come out and they live in the living room, and they live in the dining room, that sort of thing.
That's further answer. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that covers what I need.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Simeon. Mr. Fisher?
Yes, sir. A few of my questions are first directed at Laura. You mentioned in your letter that they need a variance for the two smaller rooms, but the 1 and 2 bedroom don't meet our minimum requirement, but it doesn't mention a variance for those in this letter. Is one needed?
I figured it up according to the ordinance standards. Like I said, you can't really specifically define the memory care. The studio apartments, our ordinance doesn't address that.
Okay.
So it's the closest I could come to what they have. And,
Well, you state that our ordinance requires 530 for a single bedroom and 630 for a 2 bedroom, yet they're only providing 433 and 537. So they're roughly 100 foot short on each of this 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom apartments as well. On page 2 of your letter.
I got it up for a 49 square variance for the minimum floor area for the memory care unit and a 4 square foot variance for the 34 assisted living studio units. 530 is for the 1 bedroom. 530 square feet is the minimum for a 1 bedroom unit. The 1 bedroom unit they're showing is 433.
So they would technically need a variance for that as well.
Yeah, that's the difference between the assisted living and the elderly care facility.
And I just wanted to make sure that we cover all the variances.
Yeah, and that will be covered, that will be gone over again also, the variances.
That's fine.